The Midwife Crisis podcast will touch on sensitive topics regarding the human body, sexuality, pregnancy, and all aspects of women's health care and may not be suitable for all listeners. I am Piyar.
And I'm Kate.
And this is the Midwife Crisis podcast, Microsode. Yay! The podcast where you learn it's not just you. This is where we answer listener emails, redress previous episodes, and importantly, share our self-care. Last season, we spent our final episodes discussing the two pandemics. And people, sometimes they say, what do you mean by two pandemics? Well, the COVID-19 pandemic is worldwide, and the racial social justice pandemic is also worldwide. And so we discussed those issues in the wake of the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others. And so we promised to circle back and kind of give you an update on these issues. And first, we're going to look at the COVID pandemic.
COVID update. Boop, 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 boop. That's like my newsroom noise. You
I
like
got
that?
it. I got it.
Thank you. I'm working on a soundboard that's just my mouth.
Okay. All right.
So as you guys know, COVID still here. We just actually hit our 1 year sort of anniversary of the quarantine where we thought we were all going to get to just hang out at home for 2 weeks. Of course, Piyar and I never hung out at home. We were
Right.
we were still working the whole time. But it's interesting to sort of reflect back and look back. And so some exciting stuff that's happening now is that our numbers are improving. And that we are hopefully seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with COVID. And with that comes vaccine info. So I wanted to do a little bit of just vaccine blurb that has to do with a lot of our patient population, which is pregnant and lactating people. And so there is a preliminary preprint study that just came out 2 days ago. So it hasn't been published yet, but the data is there and you can look at it. It's called COVID-19 Vaccine Response in Pregnant and Lactating Women, a cohort study. And in this study, they found that amongst the people in the study, there was robust humoral immunity in pregnant and lactating women, and that they also transferred immunity to the neonate by the umbilical cord, so during pregnancy, and through the breast milk. And so this is a huge study. We already know.
Amazing.
We've talked about this before, but there's not a lot of great research in pregnancy and surrounding pregnancy and lactation because it's sort of unethical to put two people, that can't consent to being part of a study in a study. Right. So a lot of what we do is we look back. And so we knew that we had the information from people who had anecdotally become pregnant in these vaccine trials that were fine and well even. And we also know that we have this sort of other body of data of women who have actually contracted COVID during pregnancy and the sequelae with that. And so now we know with this vaccine that it not only is it safe, and this is for all three vaccines that are out right now, not only are they considered safe, if someone chooses to have them, but also that they can provide some immunity and protection for the neonate and for the infant. So I think that that's huge good news.
That is huge good news. And I feel like I just want to sort of insert a little caveat that the timing of our recording of this podcast and when it will be issued, there may be a time gap. And so
that's true.
And so it was a couple of days ago that this preprint came out, but it could be longer than that by the time. And things are changing every day with regard to this virus. We're learning more and more. We are learning on the job, literally. And it's really sometimes hard to explain to folks that we don't know.
Yeah. And even what our care has looked like, what our uniform has looked like, what our restrictions and recommendations look like, have just completely been turned on their head 3 times. And we'll continue to, just like in our everyday lives and just like in how we approach everything, we're going to continue to, when we know better, do better.
That's right. Know better, do better. Some good news is that we have 3 great vaccines produced by Pfizer, one and another by Moderna, and the last by Johnson & Johnson. And that's not in order of potency or efficacy or whatever. The Pfizer is a 2-part vaccine, and Moderna is also a 2-part vaccine, and Johnson & Johnson is just a single vaccination. Mm-hmm. And in just sort of anecdotally talking to folks, those who got the Johnson & Johnson kind of felt a little bit more symptomatic And I don't know if that's because they kind of put all their power into the one shot. The Moderna, you get 4 weeks, just about 4 weeks after your first injection, the second part. And on the Pfizer, 3 weeks after you get your first.
And then 2 weeks after your completed vaccine series, so that both shots, or for Johnson & Johnson, one shot, you should be at, sort of max antibody response.
Yes. And I think that that's absolutely important. Still, you're going to maintain your behavior, your safety behavior. And then 2 weeks later, things kind of relax a little bit. That does not mean take off your mask or stop washing your hands, because that's a thing of mine, and not socially distancing with people that you're around and that you don't know, who aren't in your little circle, because some folks are not opting not to get the vaccine. And one thing I want to say before I get into who's opting not to get the vaccine is, the vaccine is not a cure. So, and it's not a 100% prevention. And so those folks, the studies have shown that have been done are showing that those who are vaccinated will not become as ill. They will not require hospitalization. And
they will not die.
And they will not die. And I think that those are important factors to consider. Folks say, well, you don't even know what's going to happen. Well, we do know that part, that those 3 are super important. And with more than 500,000 people already deceased in the U.S. from this, and some who are deceased from other things, but also happen to have this problem, this virus.
And additionally, I think with the vaccines, I'm seeing a lot of people who are being like, well, I had the opportunity to get the Johnson & Johnson, but I'm holding out for, Moderna or Pfizer because it's quote unquote better. And really, we want you to know that no vaccine has ever been created to completely eradicate you from ever getting sick from this virus. That's not how they work. The way it works is it's going to save your life. And as far as that goes, as far as keeping you alive, should you contract the disease, they are all 100% effective. And really, even at, I think, 72 or 74% or something with the Johnson & Johnson, that is markedly better than almost any other vaccine that we have, that we currently give.
For sure. We get flu vaccines every year, especially as providers. We can be vectors, which means that we can transfer from person to person. And so we all get vaccinated. And that doesn't mean that we won't get the flu. One year I got vaccinated and I did get the flu. It lasted about 2 days as opposed to however long it can last in folks. And I didn't get pneumonia and I didn't. So it was a milder case. And so I think that that's really important. And interestingly enough, this flu thing brings me to, where's the flu this year? Where is the flu? So we've been seeing very few, if any, at least where I'm working with the pregnant population, flu cases. We have tested folks and they turned up negative. And I think that bears noting that people washing their hands, being masked and distancing themselves from folks, I think it's protected them from that, from the flu virus. And in addition to the COVID. So
and some lessons learned. I think people say, oh, I'm so ready for all this to be over. And honestly, we've all been through a trauma, and I don't believe that it's ever going to be 100% fully back to the way it was. And maybe that's for the better, because maybe people will keep home, even if they are like, oh, it's just a cold. Because guess what? It could be the flu. And then you've spread it to 10 people in your office, So I think some of that awareness, that social awareness, is going to be there. Stay.
And the desire to protect yourself, but also your family and anyone who you care about in your circle. It's all of that to consider. It's not just about your freedom to just run the streets.
It's not just you.
That's true. Yeah, it isn't just about wanting to get out there. And I think another thing that bears mentioning is that our normal is going to be a new normal. It's not... with regard to either pandemic, with regard to social justice and racism, with regard to COVID-19, we will have a new normal on how we comport ourselves. And we should, because we can do better.
Absolutely. Now, I think you were going to talk a little bit about who isn't getting the vaccine, but I did just want to say Well, actually, you go first.
All right. So some folks are opting not to get the vaccine. And in some cases, especially if it's a population of color who's saying, I don't want to get it, they've done things to us in the past. Well, that's a small percentage of them. And other folks just don't want to because they don't want to. It isn't very clear to me what the science is behind their not wanting to. It's more of an emotional decision and kind of for themselves and their families and anecdotes. They will talk about things they've heard or things they saw online or that kind of thing. Although none of them have talked about seeing online someone actually dying from COVID. So I think that's important. But the thing is that we've noticed that many of the folks who are opting not to get the vaccine are also people of color. And people of color fare far worse if they get the illness than the rest of the population. And so, their stats are like 3-4 times, kind of just like maternal infant mortality in the U.S., where Black folks are 3-4 more times to have, a negative outcome. Same thing with this virus. And so I think it's really important. We are not being harmed. We're being helped here. And nothing is perfect, but we have to do the best we can.
Yeah. So I was just going to add on to sort of with vaccine distribution. Of course, it's been left up to each state. But, there are huge barriers to access for the vaccine. So, we can sit here both, middle, upper class, educated people being like, woo, yeah, we're vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. Right. But we have a very different, worldview. We have very different access. We have very different, everyday barriers to being able to get the vaccine. Like, people are like, oh, yeah, I was able to get a visit. It's 30 minutes away. But if you don't have a car and if you don't have money to get there, that's going to be a huge barrier. And additionally, you're thinking of an older population that maybe can't, sign up for the visits and can't figure out how to use the website and things like that. And then also when you're looking at some of the ways that the states have decided to distribute, like based on age only, you're sort of negating the fact that the most impacted population in many cases is a BIPOC population. And also these are the people who are many times in multi-generational households where they're more likely to have a household spread. And so, I wonder if some of that could have been taken into consideration. I don't know. I don't work in public health, and I'm sure distributing the vaccine, I know, has been extraordinarily difficult in general. But I do wish there had been a little bit more sort of emphasis on that piece, on those people who may need it most.
And I think we're kind of learning by doing, because I remember with testing, you could only have drive-up testing initially. So who are the people that don't have cars?
Right.
Consider that population and that they can't do drive-up testing. And those are also the kind of folks who work in positions where their presence at work is mandatory or they're not getting any money. Yeah. And so they just sort of have those sort of jobs that are essential, but not salaried or with benefits or that kind of situation. And the same thing with the vaccine. Now, the vaccine, it does not cost, but trying to get access, they want you to sign up online. Well, some folks don't have Wi-Fi. Some folks don't have internet. And some elderly they're not sort of able, and they don't have the training or the skill to get online and try to navigate their way through that sort of situation. And then there are folks who call. And I witnessed this. Someone called. This person is in the health profession, but their partner is not. And so she was calling for her partner. She had herself on hold for 53 minutes. Who has the luxury of doing that? So she gave me all of the information. She gave it to all of us. And she said, I'm going to keep doing my job. But if they pick up the phone, I need one of you to pretend that you're his partner and schedule this procedure for me. And so that's, folks don't have that kind of luxury necessarily.
And also, differently abled people who have, barriers. Maybe they're housebound, maybe they're bedbound, maybe they're wheelchair bound. I mean, there's so many different things like that we also have to think of. And actually, in our community, they're doing a wonderful job identifying a lot of those people and going actually into the home to get them vaccinated, which is awesome. So
Yeah.
Good job, New Haven.
It really is. And there are pop-up vaccination sites around town. And so folks are responding well to that. And so I'm looking forward to whoever wanting it to be able to get it. Now, there's been a little thing that's going around with not just here, but I've read about it across the country, that folks who are close to qualifying or qualify but come from different areas have been signing themselves up for sites that would typically serve this underserved population and this marginalized population. And so it can easily negotiate all of the steps that you have to go through to get the vaccine. And so they say, I have an appointment, I'm going to get my vaccine. And I have said, have you ever even been in that neighborhood?
Right.
Like what? So you are trying to get ahead of the line. And so, that's really disappointing. It's disappointing that we're once again not going to be fair about how we go about this.
I will also just throw on there, that being said, if you are someone who finds yourself in a situation where you're like walking through Target and they're like, hey, we have one vaccine because we're about to close.
Run for it.
You go get that flipping thing. You know, it doesn't matter where they put it. I mean, again, no judgment, because I know probably not everyone believes in this. And so we're not pushing anything on you, just like everything else. That being said, if you want it and you can get it, because you are not just protecting yourself, you're protecting your whole community. And I think we're going to get there.
Absolutely. I mean, the numbers have been going down. I think we talked about that. And they've been going down because people have been sort of abiding by the rules more or less and starting to get vaccinated. And I hope that they continue to go down so that we won't have our old normal back, but we'll have hopefully a better normal. And just keep washing those hands and masking and social distancing. I think that's how we're going to help folks in the biggest way. And get if you are not against having a vaccine, then get the vaccine because it's going to do nothing but really help you. And the little bit of sickness, people kind of complained, I got sick. Well, sick how? You got COVID? No. You got a few symptoms that lasted probably 24 hours or less. And I know because I'm one of those people, but I knew why I had those symptoms. And so I just treated myself accordingly and just kept moving forward.
That's right. And this has been our COVID update. Boop, 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 beep,
Yes.
boop, boop, boop.
And that was our COVID update. And we may jump back in at some point. Also, we had promised to do an update when we were talking about the George Floyd and situation and Breonna Taylor and her killers not being brought to any kind of justice. And she was one of us. She was, a first responder, healthcare provider, and just what went on with her partner and how he was charged. And ultimately they dropped those charges. But just that, the kind of things that happen to folks because of where you live and what you look like, because basically that's what transpired there.
And again, as of today, we are 1 year out, basically, from as of yesterday when Breonna Taylor was murdered in her home. And, her mom spoke yesterday and it was beautiful and sad. And we're still waiting for justice for her and for many of these people. And so...
And right as we record now, we're starting the trial of the George Floyd case and of the folks that killed him, basically.
Yeah.
And his family was just awarded $27 million, I believe. But his brother said, "I would love my brother back. You can have the money back if you could get me my brother back." And I think that that's really important. Fine, they deserve the money, but just throwing money at people, that's not justice.
And, I think also we have to consider that exorbitant cost. I mean, the cost of life there is no price on
priceless,
that. Yeah. And the trauma and the violence. I mean, it is, but also just if you are just a money person, it is going to cost you millions and millions of dollars if we don't change what we're doing because it's not working.
Yeah, it absolutely. Can we get a vaccine for this pandemic?
Please.
I don't know. That's, something I was contemplating. I wish we could just vaccinate people against ill behavior, but we can't. And so we have to kind of do it the hard way. And here's the latest in a long list of ill behaviors. This situation with the Meghan Markle and Harry interview. And, the concerns about the color of her baby's skin, which, colorism is a whole nother ism. Even within the community of color and outside of the community of color, wondering what this baby is going to present like. And I've seen it. I've seen it in my own family with my own children. They're like, well, let's see the ears, because the ears are going to tell the true skin tone in the end. And I was like, well, let's see the ears. The baby is who the baby is. Get out of here. And basically, she was poo-pooed by the media and by the firm. For those of you who may have watched, the firm is this faceless sort of organization. It has a face for her, but not to the rest of us, about her depression and her suicidal ideation. And I think that is super important. So this is on so many levels. So the blatant racial bias that she's being subjected to. And
you can see that in just I'd seen sort of images of her pregnancy and how it was represented in the media next to Kate's, and it was like the same picture, the same like idea, like Kate's holding her belly, and it's like the Duchess is like honing in on her maternal instincts, and then like Meghan is holding her belly, and it's like, what's wrong with Meghan? She can't stop touching her belly. I mean, it's like, and it's the same freaking photo.
Yes, it's the same.
So anyway, I digress.
No, but I think that's an important digression, because it just speaks to the experience and why this is a pandemic, because she wasn't in the U.S. at that time. She was in Europe, and so it occurs there like it occurs here.
Yeah.
And so there's that piece of it, and the racial piece is huge. Like Oprah, her mouth couldn't close when they were telling her this stuff. And then, and that people went to her husband with those questions, like, what do you think, is the baby going to be dark or whatever? Yeah. And they didn't address her as though she's a non-person. She's not an adult. She can't have an opinion.
Right.
And, she went, despite all that, she goes to these folks and she says, I'm depressed and I don't really want to live. And she didn't get support. And that is important, because that's another worldwide pandemic, that people have emotional issues and they have mental issues and certifiable diagnoses, and they get, once again, poo-pooed. It's just sort of like, buck up, sister, or whoever it is.
Right.
And aren't we giving you enough already? You live in this lap of luxury, and you have to go and get depressed and sort of have suicidal ideations. And those things are what they are. It's kind of like someone with diabetes who happens to eat some bread and their pizza, and their blood sugar goes up really high. Okay, that's a thing.
Right.
But do you say to them, well, you can say to them, I just want to advise you, be careful with the pizza and you need some extra medication. But I feel like there's much more compassion than there are for those who have those kind of issues, as though that's not really a medical thing. Right. That's just you being a crybaby.
And that mental health stigma is so harmful, because you're going to see people whose life depend on your support and you're caring of them, and you're addressing their mental health issues. And it can literally be life or death should you choose to ignore them.
Yes, for sure. And these are common themes that are not just for Meghan Markle, but for those who identify, you take the color out of it, and as women and young girls, that they are not heard and that they are not supported.
Yeah.
And in the long run, it costs everyone.
Yep.
It's costly for everyone. And then the issues with interracial relationships, people claim not to be racist until there's a chance that a baby of color is going to join the family. And then it becomes an issue. And even Harry, they had been in a relationship for a while, but he admitted that he had to educate himself on matters relating to race and walking in his wife's shoes, although he can't be her per se, but he tried to he being privileged meant that he wasn't required to give it a lot of thought until he decided to make a life with a woman of color.
Right. And also something we've learned this year, and I'm saying we as in people who are not Black or a person of color, something we've learned is it's not enough to just be like, oh, that stuff doesn't matter to me. You have to sort of actively be engaged and be educating and be evolving and changing in order to be an ally. You can't just be like, this is fine, and why can't we just all be the same? Because it's not like that, homie.
The most offensive, maybe there are more offensive things, but it's up there on the list, is that you tell me when you see me, you don't see color. You don't see, I don't see color in anybody. I don't see, you're the same as everybody else. And no, that's not really acceptable, because to not see that is to negate who I am and where I come from and the history that comes with me. And that's not to say I want to always be talking about the 400-year enslavement of people. No, I don't. But I do want to be respected for who I am and not to be treated as though it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because it does. Because most people who look like me are not necessarily people of privilege. And, it's very interesting because the British folks were upset about her, divulging this history. And even that man, Piers Morgan, walked off his set because he said, I don't believe her and she doesn't matter or it doesn't matter. And, she get over herself. And he doesn't matter to me. He doesn't matter. But I understand that that's sort of the low hum there. It's just sort of like, how dare she reveal things? She's in the monarchy. Well, she's married to someone in the monarchy and they shouldn't be airing their dirty laundry. That's all bullshit. People are in the monarchy because someone created it, not because there was some, I don't know where it came from, but years and years and years ago, they just decided these people are better than those people.
At the end of the day, we're all people, no matter what. And additionally, I think that's that cultural thing as well, is that like, you shouldn't be talking about this because this is something you talk about privately and this is something you address this way. And guess what? If you feel most comfortable talking about your mental health issues with 1 million people, good on you. And if I feel most comfortable not sharing it with other people, but dealing with it my own way, good on me. But we're not all going to be the same.
No, we're not monolith. And I think the other thing that's important is that people like her, who folks kind of admire from afar for whatever reason, because she's an actor, because she's beautiful, because Harry has swag, because whatever. I think that it's important to those folks can speak to issues and it can carry a lot of weight. The fact that she is admitting to the world that she had these issues, these emotional issues, and these race issues, that matters to other people, and they sort of sometimes govern themselves accordingly. And I think that she can bring this to the fore, kind of like the miscarriage. And people were very critical also of Chrissy Teigen when she lost her baby. And why does she have to bring that up and talk about it? Because she wants to, and because people need to talk about it, and they need to talk about their rainbow babies, and they need to, which is the baby that you have after a successful pregnancy, after you have a loss. And all of that is important. And if they're comfortable sharing it and it can help a lot of people, I think that that's important, that they can only be useful, not to be criticized.
Absolutely. I've been caring for a lot of patients lately that just, happen to be Black or Latinx in my new job. And they will often express to me that they feel that they're being ignored, or they'll come to me because they'll be like, you're my third person I've gone to because I have this issue and I've shared it and no one's listening to me. Yeah. Or my provider seems really bothered that I keep having yeast and, whatever. And it's bananas, because I can tell you right now, again, as a white person, that's not happening in the other way. We're not saying things like that. You don't hear people saying like, oh, she's always late about a white person who's late. Right. But if it's a Black person who's late, they're like, ugh, her, she's always 5 minutes late. Well, guess what? She might have taken 2 buses and then one of them, she didn't have enough fare on her card and then she had to walk 10 blocks. Like, just, we have to meet people where they are. We always say that, but it's so true. I actually had a patient who came to me as a new patient because her postpartum care had been so severely lacking. Ooh. She had no idea what had happened to her body. No one explained to her at all about the 4th trimester, about her healing. I mean, she had questions about her, tear. She, had all different types of concerns that she was wondering about. And, I can't help but question if it would have looked different or if her care would have been attended to differently had she looked differently.
Oh, I absolutely think that's true, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's where folks say, we treat everyone the same. We use the science. But there's a little caveat in there because how you approach people, what you think of them when you see them, I literally was taking a walk recently with my son, my oldest son, and a woman tried to cross the street as we approached with our masks on. And like we were doing everything we were supposed to do. He walks on the outside, I walk on the inside. That's just a courtesy that I taught him when he was younger. And she literally tried to cross into heavy traffic. And then as we passed her...
I'm not trying to laugh, but...
into heavy traffic. And then as we passed her, she decided, I guess I don't need to cross anyway, because she just got back on the sidewalk and kept walking and then looked back at us because we looked back at her. And I said, well, thank you very much. Like, what were we going to do? What were we bothering you for? And that just is sort of a small example of how you see people and how you treat them differently than...
And if you are listening and you are a provider, you are a future provider, or just a person in the world, I mean, if you notice these things and you have the privilege to speak up and try to mention something, and this is not about being like woke, and being like, I got this, I'm all over it, because that's also very rigid. You need to be a little fluid, a little in the gray area, and be able to, come across and verbalize and, again, do better.
And don't just be performative.
Yes.
Don't put on a T-shirt that says Black Lives Matter and then just keep treating people the same way. That's troubling.
Mm-hmm. Sure is.
Well, we're going to, on every episode, we kind of address some of these issues. And so this is not the end. And it's not the all, because we don't ever profess to provide the all. We just kind of talk about things that have sort of touched us in the recent days or months or whatever. And so... we appreciate everyone's sort of tolerance with that and your suggestions and your comments.
Absolutely. And especially if you're out there and you're hearing this and you're like, well, that really strikes me differently. Please share, because we, again, are two limited perspectives. Right. So we would love to hear yours as well.
We would.
So, as we do on every Microsode, we're going to talk about the ever-important Self-Care Corner, where we talk about how we've loved ourselves and how we've cared for ourselves in the past, recent past. So, what do you got, PR?
Swedish death cleanse. That is what I've been doing. And that's where you kind of go through your house and you purge it as though you were gone. And it's very effective in many ways, but then your family does not have to go through that, going through all your old papers and all kinds of just nonsense and kitschy items that you kind of let collect dust and that sort of thing. And I told my children I was doing this, and I said, you can look it up. It's a thing. I didn't make it up. And the response was really positive. One of them said, please do, because we don't want your shit. And that's a direct quote. And the other one was like, does it include furniture too? Because you have a lot of furniture and I'm going to make a bonfire out of it. I said, no, those are heirlooms. Come on, guys. But no, really, it has been very liberating and freeing for me. I know where things are. I can find them. And I haven't gotten through the whole house, but in the rooms where I've done it, it's sort of like I have that or I don't have it because I know I tossed it out. And then I have to either get it or figure out a way. So it's been emotionally, it's been very uplifting for me. In my house, I go through it and I say, who lives here? This place is nice. As opposed to a year ago when it was, who lives here? Like, what's the hoarder's name that lives in this joint?
I'm feeling a little left behind because I still see our joke was always like if something happened to her, I'd have to like get there real quick because anyone else would be like, oh my God. But yes. I'd be like, oh no, I got you. And then like my joke's always that someone will come to my house and call DCF because I have children and there's just like stuff everywhere. So now I'm feeling a little left behind. I need some Swedish death cleanse in my life.
Well, if you need help, I will gladly come. And it's even easier when you have someone with you who's like, purge that. That's just nothing. Get rid of it. And, limit your collections and that kind of thing. You've enjoyed them. Gift them to people. Yeah. I've been using some little art pieces and stuff, and I've been gifting it to folks because I think they would like to have that. And I would like for them to have it. And then we don't have to go through who wants stuff and who doesn't want stuff when I'm gone. And that doesn't mean I'm preparing for death. I'm preparing to live my last, however many years, days, months, years that I have left, that they will be free.
Amen. Life is short.
And you only get one.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, so I have much to this sort of same tune that we've been discussing, sort of not just like walking the walk and talking the talk, or just not talking the talk, but walking the walk.
Yes.
Either way.
Yes.
I have always been and will always be this proponent of body positivity, but I also have the most crippling body dysmorphia of like anyone I've ever met. And so my goal, I've talked a little bit about how I've had this sort of like journey to betterness, which has included, yes, a little bit of weight loss and yes, including lots of exercise in my life. But I'm also trying so desperately to just change my outlook because I'm not just a body. And so exactly. I've been doing a lot of work just kind of as I'm sort of losing weight, fighting the urge to compare.
Yes.
Because doing things like a before and after implies that your before was not good enough and was less worthy. And that is not true because I kick ass no matter what weight, no matter what size, no matter how many times I've gotten on my little bike. That being said, I'm still riding my Peloton, which is what I call my bike that is not a Peloton. And I'm still running in the streets and like doing all that stuff because it makes me feel good. I'm focusing on the good.
Good. Amen.
So yeah.
Amen.
All right. Well, we've come to the end of another Microsode. So we would like to thank Baobab Tree Studios, our friends, our family, and you, everyone who makes this podcast possible.
Please be sure to subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, Android, and now iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the Midwife Crisis Podcast, all one together, or email us at midwifecrisispodcast@gmail.com. We love to get feedback. Positive, negative, we just want feedback so we can give folks what they're looking for.
Until next time, I was supposed to talk about my sourdough bread, but I didn't. So now here's the pun. Bake the world a better place.
Yes, she makes sourdough bread on a regular basis. She got, what is that thing you use to make it?
The starter.
The starter. She got a starter and is taking on a life of its own in her home.
That's right.
And for me, speak kindly, but let your voice be heard, especially if you feel like you're a person who isn't being listened to. And speak kindly if you're a person who's doing the speaking.
Bye.
Adios. Living our life.